expansion was the growth of state power. You see, during this period, it's going to be important to understand that European monarchs were growing far more powerful than they had ever been before, and that was at the expense of historically powerful groups like the nobility. And so with this centralization of power, monarchs now played a much more significant role in the economic decisions of their state. And perhaps one of the most significant decisions had to do with interregional trade. You see, as Europe started emerging from the backwaters of world history, many folks, especially among the upper classes, started demanding spices far more powerful than they had ever been before, and that was at the expense of historically powerful groups like the nobility. And so with this centralization of power, monarchs now played a much more significant role in the economic decisions of their state. And perhaps one of the most significant decisions had to do with interregional trade. You see, as Europe started emerging from the backwaters of world history,
oh, okay. So I guess I'll turn that down and turn that up. Bueno.
From Asia and some other goods as well. But there was a big fat problem with that. You remember all those land-based empires we met back in Unit
5.5
here during this period, and they happened to control the land-based trading routes over which those other spices were exchanged. And that meant by the time they got to Europe, the prices were jacked way up, and so even the fanciest of fancy pants Europeans were like, butter my backside and call me a biscuit. What, you make this pepper out of unicorn hooves or something? So that meant European states had a big incentive to find other routes, namely sea-based routes to Asia, which would allow them to trade on their own. And then the third cause of European exploration was economic. I've got two terms you need to know. First, let me introduce you to mercantilism. Now, mercantilism was a state-driven economic system that characterized these imperial European states during this period. And basically what you need to know here is that mercantilist economics saw the world's wealth like a pie, and the goal was to get as much of that pie as possible. Now, the thing about pie is that there's only a fixed amount. Since mercantilism measured wealth in gold and silver, there's only so much of those minerals in the world. And so, in order to get the biggest piece of that pie, these states' main goal was to maintain a favorable balance of trade, which just means they organize their economies around exports and avoid imports as much as possible. And why? Well, if you're exporting goods, that means gold and silver are coming in. And if you're importing goods, that means gold and silver are going out. Anyway, the point to remember here is that this system created a strong motivation for expanding empires through overseas colonization, because once a colony was established, it created a closed market for exports from the imperial country. In other words, in this arrangement, colonies existed only to enrich their imperial parents. And then the second economic field was the joint stock company. Now, by definition, a joint stock company was a limited liability business, often chartered by the state that was funded by a group of private investors. And what I mean by limited liability is that those investors who pooled their money to finance the exploration could only lose what they invested. Or you might say their liability was limited. Here's where I tell you that this whole sea-based empire building project could only be successful if the state and its merchants were tied together in mutual interdependence. What I mean is states relied on merchants to expand their influence across lands, while merchants relied on states to grant them monopolies on various routes of trade. And it was joint stock companies that made this power and wealth husband work. But I should also mention that it's the states that primarily used this new kind of company that prospered during this period. Those that stuck with state-sponsored voyages like Spain and Portugal were gradually decreasing in power. Now, you should at least know one of these joint stock companies by name, and I reckon I'll introduce you to the Dutch East India Company, which you'll sometimes see abbreviated as the VOC. It was chartered by the Dutch state in 1602, and included in that charter was a monopoly on the Indian Ocean trade. As we'll see in a minute, the Dutch positively dominated the Indian Ocean, which expanded Dutch influence there and made the company's investors richer than a dwarvish miner in Middle Earth. That's such a nerdy joke, but I stand by it. Anyway, both the British and the French developed their own joint stock companies as well, and that was one of the primary means by which they extended their influence also. And this fervor to insert themselves into the Indian Ocean created powerful rivalries among European states.
801 on this shit out of...
And that rivalry led to attacks on each other's trading
shit, on the SD?
Okay, now that we understand the
that's
causes of the
surprising.
rise of sea-based empires, let's meet the main players. And for this, we really need to rewind the clock a bit, since all that mercantilism and joint stock company talk came after. Anyway, the first European state to get power pins on was Portugal, thanks to the leadership of our boy Prince Henry the Navigator, who brought together sailors, map makers, and shipbuilders to figure out how to sail down the Atlantic coast of Africa. And initially, Portugal's interest lay in the gold trade in West Africa, but by the 1440s, they had their eyes on entering the Indian Ocean. Now, to that end, they established what's known as a trading post empire around the coast of Africa and throughout the Indian Ocean. This was a unique kind of empire. Like when we think of overseas empires, we tend to think of colonies. And that's not wrong. We're going to get to that. But colonies, in case you've never established one yourself and don't know, are expensive. So the Portuguese strategy was to simply set up bare bones trading posts.
So fucking scared. Holy shit.
And they were largely able to do this, if you'll recall from earlier, because of their fast ships like the Caravel and the Carrack, which were loaded with cannons that can blow up any challenger.
That just feels so weird.
But that bare bones trading post kind of empire was not how Spain did it, and I reckon we ought to sit with them for a spell. You see, by the time Spain started thinking about maritime expansion, Portugal already had control of the Indian Ocean. And so the Spanish crown decided to sponsor sail across the Atlantic in search of a western route to the Spice Trade. And you probably know the story by now. Columbus sailed west, and instead of finding a route to Southeast Asia, instead ran into two massive continents that no one in Europe had previously known about. And side note, to the end of his life, Columbus was like, I found a route to Asia. But it became pretty clear through voyages of other explorers that it was not, in fact, Asia. Oh, he's crazy, y'all. Anyway, as Spanish voyages to the New World multiplied, it established their claim to a vast world of colonization, not just the establishment of trading posts, and it marked the opening of the transatlantic trade, which would eventually become even more prosperous than the Indian Ocean trade. But I don't mean to imply that the Spanish were uninterested in the Indian Ocean trade. No, they went ahead and set up their base of operations in the Philippines, but instead of setting up piddly trading posts, they went full colonial over there. And in order to establish and maintain control there, the Spanish used the same methods that they used over the Americas, like tribute collecting and coerced labor. And so, to put it mildly, Portugal and Spain were getting all kinds of rich off this arrangement, and that is when other states looked at the pie and said, oh, we gotta get us some of that. And I'll introduce you to the big three that rose up during this period. First was France, who sponsored westward expeditions in order to find a North Atlantic Sea route to Asia. They also didn't find it, mainly because it doesn't exist, but they did establish a presence in Canada, which gave them access to the incredibly lucrative fur trade with indigenous peoples in the region. And the French Empire in the Americas was similar to the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean, since their holdings were small and mainly focused on trade. And that's about the time that England came to the imperial party. So after Queen Elizabeth I rose to power and like a boss defeated Spain's attempts to invade England, she took advantage of Spain's weakness and started sponsoring exploration into the Americas. So she commissioned Sir Walter Raleigh with the venture and established England's first colony on Roanoke Island called Virginia. As it turns out, it was kind of a disaster and wouldn't begin to turn around until 1607 with the establishment of Jamestown in Virginia. And again, the British weren't just interested in the Americas. They were for sure interested in chomping on the popsicle of power and the Indian Ocean too, and for them, India was the prize. But as it turned out, they lacked sufficient naval power to take over the subcontinent from the Mughals and had to be content with establishing a few trading posts along the coast. But don't feel too bad for them, because later in the 18th century, their naval power would be substantial, and those trading posts would be transformed into full colonial
I'm trying to figure out where this is.
And then, not to be out-imperialed by other states, the Dutch joined the party as well. So it was during this period that the Dutch gained independence from Spain, and it wasn't long before they became the most prosperous state in Europe. And with all that newfound power and wealth, they sent their fancy flouts to challenge Spanish and Portuguese control over the Indian Ocean trade, and spoiler alert, the Dutch VOC very much came out on top. And while they also dabbled in colonizing the Americas, like here in New Amsterdam, it was mainly Dutch control of strategic locations throughout the Indian Ocean and their monopoly over the spice trade that increased their power and influence. Okay, now let's focus on one of the most significant effects of this flurry of maritime empire across the Atlantic, namely the Columbian Exchange. Now, by definition, this refers to the transfer of new diseases, food, plants, and animals between the eastern and western hemispheres, and I'm going to give you some examples of each. But before I do, let me just emphasize that the Columbian Exchange refers to environmental phenomena, so don't get it confused with things like the triangular trade or anything like that. So first, let's consider the transfer of disease. But before I tell you what they are, you need to understand why this was such a big deal. See, because folks throughout Afro-Eurasia had been in contact for millennia, they had developed immunities to diseases transferred among them. However, because of the isolation of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, the diseases Europeans introduced were devastating. So first and foremost, Europeans introduced smallpox and measles into the indigenous populations. They spread fast and were incredibly deadly. As they spread through the Caribbean and Central America and then into South America, they cut some populations in half. And in some cases, it killed 90% of the people who were infected. And then the third disease was malaria, which was carried by disease vectors like mosquitoes. And all in all, while European states were growing exceedingly wealthy and powerful through their empires in the Americas, the introduction of these diseases meant that indigenous populations were devastated. And it's no wonder why they refer to this as the Great Dying. Okay, now second, let's consider the transfer of food and plants, which had major effects on populations both in the New World and in the East. So European settlers brought with them technology and trade, among many other things, which were staples in European diet. And then eventually they also introduced African and Asian foods like rice and bananas and sugar. And while indigenous Americans mostly maintained their traditional diets, they also incorporated some of these new foods, which varied their diets and therefore slowly increased their lifespan. But going the other way, crops from the Americas like maize and potatoes were introduced to Europe, Africa, and Asia, and that contributed to healthier populations, which led to longer lifespans, and the result was a population explosion after settlement. Additionally, the millions of enslaved Africans who were forcibly sent to the Americas introduced foods as well, including okra. Now, as demand increased in Europe for these American crops, sprawling plantations were established in the Americas that focused on cash cropping. And what's cash cropping, says you? Well, says I, it's a method of agriculture that focuses on growing crops, usually a single crop, primarily for export. So, for example, in the Caribbean, sugarcane was grown in abundance with the work of enslaved African laborers who then exported to market in Europe and the Middle East. And third, let's consider the transfer of animals. Europeans introduced pigs and sheep and cattle to the Americas, but by far the most consequential animal was the horse. Not only was the horse used for agricultural work, but it also enabled indigenous plains peoples to hunt buffalo far more effectively.
There's that full combo.
Okay, now by this point, we established the global balance of power would continue to shift towards European states who were busy establishing maritime empires throughout the world. But I hope you didn't think everybody was happy about this. So don't be crazy. No, there were plenty of examples of resistance, so I'm going to tell you about several. First, there was resistance from some Asian states against the intrusion of Western powers in the Indian Ocean, and here let's meet Tokugawa Japan. Now, Japan had just emerged from a real contentious period in their history and was experiencing some unity under a shogun from the Tokugawa. And at first, when the Portuguese and Spanish and the Dutch came knocking on Japan's door, the shogun was relatively interested in trading for gunpowder weapons, which helped.
Okay, one miss.
But here's where I tell you that in addition
94.96.
motivations for European imperialism was the spread of Christianity. And so by the second half of the 16th century, a growing number of Japanese people had converted to Christianity, and the shogun began to perceive that development as a threat to the hard-won unification of Japan. So the shogun went ahead and recruited all those
4.7.
Christian
Okay, I've never
missionaries
played
from
this
Japan and
show before.
suppressed this foreign
So I have like,
sometimes with
you should have seen me
brutality.
yesterday. I had
As a
like
result,
3
Japan was
videos
completely
playing in the
isolated
background.
itself from the growing influence of European commerce in the Indian Ocean, only maintaining trade with the Dutch. Second, we can see resistance on the local level in Europe.
This is probably like the best way to study. I remember
which occurred in
everything
France.
you're
So in
saying.
response to the newly adopted political doctrine of absolutism, which concentrated all political power under the monarch, a series of
wait, hold on.
rebellions
Oh,
known
yeah,
as
I need to
Fronde
make the
occurred
chat
starting in
bigger, 'cause that was-
1648. Basically, in order to finance imperial expansion, several new edicts were passed that increased.
Yesterday I had like
taxation on
3
French
videos
subjects. And so
going
the
at
French
once.
nobility, whose power had been under threat from the growing
Maybe I
power of
should
the
turn 'em
monarchy,
down
got all
on the stream
kinds
a
of
bit.
fed up and led peasants in spontaneous
Boom.
rebellions that lasted for 6 years. But in the end, this resistance was crushed. And bonus, the
We'll figure
monarchy
it out.
increased in power even more. And then third, we need to consider
1 day ago?
resistance from the
Okay.
enslaved. Here I'm going to introduce you to
Oh.
the Maroon societies in the Caribbean and Brazil. So in most European colonies in the Americas, enslaved Africans were
Oh, I can ask that. There's the
but
fuck,
also in most of those
3.2.
colonies, small pockets of free
This is
blacks existed,
probably
mainly
easy.
made up of runaway slaves, and these were known as Maroon societies. Now, for all you know about European
going to
political
change this
power,
though.
it shouldn't surprise you to find out that imperial authorities were not fond of these communities. And so, for example, in Jamaica, colonial troops sought to crush
Yeah.
these Maroon societies, but the free blacks, led by a fiery woman called Queen.
See, I should be doing stuff right now, but whatever. I'm starting to remember when all I would do was play Mania back in like 2023. You were there for that, dude. That was a weird period of time. Holy shit.
That's true even if the networks were becoming increasingly European. That shouldn't surprise you if you've been with me since you were 2. Remember that when we were talking about the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean Network and the Trans-Saharan route, there were certain cities in space that grew in power and prosperity mainly because they were located in strategic points along the way. And it's the same story here, and there are 2 examples you need to know specifically from Africa. First is the Asante Empire here in West Africa. They were able to
Ah, damn, full combo gone.
European traders were after things like gold and ivory and enslavement.
Twice?
Economic
Shit.
partnership made the Asante so rich that after they
I'm not S-ing anymore. Okay, hold on.
every time they run out again. That wealth further enabled the Asante to expand their military and consolidate
I was
political
wrong.
power over
24.6.
And then second is the Kingdom
like
of the Congo here in southern Africa. They made strong diplomatic ties
How long
with
is
the
this?
Portuguese.
5 minutes?
Things like gold,
This song is
copper,
5
and
fucking
enslavement.
minutes, yo.
And interestingly,
Okay.
similar to the way some African leaders converted to Islam in the last period in order to facilitate trade with other Muslims, the King of the Congo converted to Christianity in order to facilitate trade with Christian states that were knocking on his door. And although the economic relationship would later deteriorate, in the beginning it led to the expansion of the Congolese state power and wealth. Okay, now let's turn the corner and talk about how both change and continuity occurred in networks of exchange during this period. Now, that sounds about as boring as licking tree bark in order to guess a species. Well, you're wrong. It's exciting. So let's start with the Indian Ocean Network. Big change during this period, obviously, is the entrance and massive power grabs of European states into this network. Even so, there was significant continuity as well. Middle Eastern, South Asian, East Asian, and South
I mean, like the classic outfit's not that bad, but like the test is tomorrow,
even if they now had to dodge all those
and
European
that's like
cannibals. In fact, European entrance
scary.
into this trade network increased profits not only for Europeans but also for many of these merchants who had always used the network for trade. Additionally, long-established merchants like the Gujaratis continued to make use of the Indian Ocean trade even while Europeans sought to dominate. The Gujarati significantly increased the power and wealth of the Mughal Empire through their ongoing participation in the Indian Ocean trade. And it was precisely because of the continued power of folks like the Gujarati that the Portuguese never achieved full domination in the Indian Ocean. And then another significant continuity is that despite growing European dominance on the sea, overland routes like the Silk Road were still almost entirely controlled by various Asian land-based powers, most notably Ming China and the Qing after it, and the Ottoman Empire as well. Also, peasant and artisan labor continued and even intensified in many regions as demand for food and consumer goods increased as a result of multiplying trade connections. For example, as the demand for cotton increased throughout Europe, peasant farmers in South Asia increased their production for export and in many cases increased their standard of living. And the same was true of silk production in China. Okay, now let's shift and talk about changing continuity in the West, although to be honest, it was mostly change. And why? Well, unlike the Indian Ocean network, the opening of the Atlantic was completely new. Thank
shit. Hold on. I got like locked in. AP roll needs to shut up for a minute.
That had a big effect back in Europe. First, that silver was used to purchase luxury goods from China, which both satisfied the Chinese demand.
Shut up, Heimler. I don't want my brain cows getting milk right now.
Second, the goods that silver purchased were then traded.
Oh shit. Oh shit.
And then regarding labor on the Atlantic system, much of it came from coercion.
And there goes my wrist. Fuck. Can I get a break, please? It's been a constant stream of notes for the past like 2 minutes. No? Okay. Fuck. I was hoping that would be it right there, but no. I'm almost at a B too. Oh my god. There we go, break.
Now, one example of an existing labor system that was continued during this period was the Midas system. If you weren't flipping through Unit 1, you'll remember that this system was developed and deployed by the Inca Empire, and basically it amounted to requiring their subjects to provide labor on state projects for a certain number of years. So when the Spanish
Yeah, I'm a B now? Fuck.
they went ahead and used the Midas system for their silver mining operations.
This song is not fun. Holy shit.
And to be clear, the Midas
I'm gonna get this chart done once and I'm never gonna touch it again.
people to work in private mines for the good of individuals and the Spanish state. But despite some continuity and changes in labor
Oh my gosh, never mind. Oh. I was hoping the course would be easier. Okay. I'm using so much wrist force for some reason. Like I'm trying to hold it down and it's not working. I'm using so much force to hold it down. Instead of just like keeping it there gently. Fuck, it's hurting. Okay. Whatever. I'm in carpal tunnel anyways sometime. I'm ready to steak. I thought that was the other. No. Okay. Whatever.
And they did both. And look, I am going to get to other new labor systems, but we need to dwell a little longer on the African slave trade because its significance was all out of proportion to the others that I'm going to mention. So here I just want to mention three social effects of the growth of the African slave trade that you need to know. The first effect was a profound gender imbalance, especially in West African states, since men were preferred to women.
67. I actually went up for that. So so
that leads to the
we're like cooking. 20 days ago we were at 100K. We rose up almost 20K in 20 days.
When you remember that in many places there were twice as many women as there were men. And then the third social effect was cultural assimilations. A good example here is the growing emergence of Creole languages in places like the Caribbean and Brazil. And Creole languages are basically nasal languages, and in this case various Creole
9 months ago.
Okay, now let's get back to the new labor systems that represented change in the Atlantic world, and we'll go faster through these. So second, there was indentured servitude, which describes an arrangement in which a laborer would sign a contract that bound them to a particular work for a period of time, usually 7 years. Then at the end of the contract, they could go free and do whatever it is they wanted to do. We see this form of labor, especially in the British colonies in North America, where many working-class workers in Great Britain signed indentures in order to finance their journey across the sea to the New World. And then the third new labor system comes to us from the Spanish that was in coming into this. Spanish used this system to divide indigenous Americans among Spanish settlers who were then forced to provide labor for the Spanish in exchange for food. It's a little like the feudalism that we learned about. When flood is being coming into the system, decline not least because of the widespread abuses that were
Oh, I fucking hated that. What the hell? see what 9 months ago me was on about. This is kind of fun. You're good. I'm at 93, dude. Holy shit. A bird? What kind of bird? Have you seen the one post where it's like, I saw it. Saw a bird. Did you get a photo? No. Flew away. Oh shit, hold on. I only want 40 people for that? You're shitting me. I got 1.9k global though. That's like...
And the important thing to remember here is that prior to the imposing of the caste system, native peoples were part of a wide variety of linguistic and cultural groups. But the caste system erased that cultural complexity and ordered their society by the standards of a small minority. And another example here is the transition from the Ming to the Qing dynasty in China. Now recall from the Qing was established by non-Chinese folks, mainly the Manchu. And in doing so, they preserved all the best bureaucratic positions in the empire for ethnically Manchu people to this ethnic autonomy. And finally, the third category of change in social hierarchies involved the struggles of existing elites in various states. You see, elite members of various societies have always exerted significant influence on political and economic policy, but with the increasing power of monarchs, this influence began to wane. For example, let's consider the Russian boyars who made up the aristocratic landowning class in Russia. They exerted great power in the administration.
Fuck. Oh my god. Oh wait, shit, the video ended. Hold up. I still have the fucking my charge stuck in my head for this shit. $155. I'm at 83k. We're slowly going up. Fuck yeah. I'm not gonna get rating for that. How old is that? 1 year ago? Holy shit. Okay, whatever. I'll do it. Fuck yeah, okay. 53, 54 people. 9K. Okay, not better. Oh, I played that a day ago, actually. 9 months ago? Fuck yeah, sure. Should I put this in fun as fuck? Really? I'm about to go. Fuck. Fuck! Oh my god, I was so fucking close too. Look at that shit. At an A. At an A. How much does an A get you? Like. Fuck. Holy shit. I haven't played this chart since 9 months ago, apparently. Oh shit, wait. That was it? Oh. Okay. I'm not mad at that. You're shitting me. Really? You're telling me a 9-month-old score? Okay. Oh. Shit. Yo. Okay. Oh shit. Do I have Tokyo Teddy Bear? No. That's definitely no, I have it. Yeah, what the fuck? Okay, there's mine. Oh shit, I guess so. Oh, I need... No, oh my god, you're kidding. I still get it. I actually hate that song. Eh, what the fuck? It's a... Why would they do that? Yeah. Here, okay, here's the 2009 version. Really? You're gonna make me get the fucking Project Sekai version? It's like sad. Oh, it sucks. I've always hated this part. Whatever. It's gonna be a jack map. Watch this shit. No, it's a stream map. Really? What is the appeal of this? What is the appeal in stream maps? I got a B on this a few days ago on my phone. So. It's just made me realize how shit quality my headphones I use at the arcade are. I've never heard a song in good quality before, so my shitty headphones. Fuck. Oh, come on. Dude, I was 0.2 away from a B. Holy shit. The 0.3 away from a B. That's okay. 68 up, 83.6. I'm not bad with that. Wait, I want to look at the Fuller chart. Yeah. 13 plus. Okay, sure. 13 plus. It's doable.
That's not that bad. How bad is the Joni thumb check? 14 plus? Fuck. Okay. Might be a little fucking difficult. Holy shit. Okay, that last part was weird, but the rest of that was not 14. Garakuda. Oh, if Garakuda's a 15. Wait, is it? Oh, it is. So I can clear this. anyways, I'm gonna go fucking study. I probably should